Well, this is a follow up from KimCon, where, among so many other things, I was able to enjoy the first attempt at a game that I've had in design for about 4 years, which basically means most of the time it's just sitting in a hard drive. But it was the late addition to the strange little set of games about religion that I scribbled down all the way back in 2011, 2012. There's some history here if you care. I used to run these little contests or activities anyway at the Forge called the Ronnies, which involved making 24-hour role-playing games given prompts, word prompts. It's one of a whole family of little activities or contests that people do that's probably largely forgotten, but I fancy that you can see quite a lot of impact on other games and later games by some of the same people way back in the Ronnies. Well, anyway, I couldn't help but participate myself in private, and that's where it was a mutual decision came from, as a matter of fact, off of the terms rat and girlfriend. Well, anyway, for later rounds, I did my own as well, and they all clustered into these religion games back in 2011. Real kind of unexpected, maybe perhaps classic for my age. Who knows? But that includes Estimated Profit and Shine a Light and Cathedral. You can tell they're all coming from 60s and 70s rock and roll songs for the titles, and they all at least have a very strong connection with a Grateful Dead song in each case. They're all color first. They're just nuts and weird mechanics. I just sort of let it loose instead of working off of mechanics that I knew and loved and had watched develop at the table. Instead, they were just like out of the blue whacked mechanics. Well, anyways, this one came along just a little bit later, also associated with a Ronnie's Round, in this case using the terms Amazon and Lust. And much like Trollbabe, one of these absolutely unplanned game designs that just sort of jumped up and said, write this down. Well, it also struck me as among one of the most unplayable things I'd ever done. Not necessarily due to its more radical components. After all, I kind of broke open the door with the Trespass and Spione. I just kind of took it a little further in this case. Well, anyway, and it also involved a bunch of techniques that I actually don't particularly care for. So again, go figure. Anyway, so this is, all there is right now is just this few pages of manuscript. I have about, 15, 16 such things kicking around anyway. But what's this about? And how does it work? You know what? Let's just go with how it worked and how it went. I played with 3 other people, 1 woman and 3 men total. And that sort of matters, although who knows whether it really matters. It doesn't factor into the rules at all like it does in some other games. But just saying. Because everybody is playing members of an Amazon tribe, and the Amazon tribe is very, almost absurdly idealized in some ways. It's not any culture that we know about except from pop culture, kind of this weird neo-pagan, semi-Native American, semi-ancient Greek something. And the characters, you even roll 3d6 to see how many letters you get from a specific list, which is most like I's and Y's and, L's and stuff like that. But the point is you have this list of letters, 16 letters with a few repetitions of them, and you roll, and that's how many letters you get to choose from the list in order to make your character's name. So that gives you sort of an idea of the, deliberately over the top notion of this Amazon tribe. There's a group creation of the tribe. I said idealized, but only a little. The point is not to problematize. You don't make them, cannibals or something, but you definitely do have to make some choices about certain things. And some of random, so birth rate and stuff like that, and all these factor together and kind of snap together to make a very unique tribe, um, full of potential activity and potential priorities that's different in each case. Well, anyway, the way play works, still not talking about that yet. I'm getting around to it. Well, you have two alternating ways to play. And the first, meaning the first one you do, is basically action play. And it's dicey. You sit about and you start talking about what your Amazons are doing. You know what season it is of the year, and you start just saying what's going on. Once we know what each one is sort of just doing, then people pose problems that are cropping up. They can involve the wild, something to do with natural problems. They can involve strife, which is to say some sort of issue within the tribe itself that's posing a genuine problem for them. And then third, battle, which is to say some kind of hostile interaction with a neighboring or other community. Well, the way it works is real freeformy in terms of people talking. So you can start, your track. It's called a track yourself, where you say, there's, it's winter. All right. Well, there's a sudden, freeze, and a whole bunch of people are hurt by it. We weren't ready for it. We hadn't quite set up our, our tents or our cabins yet in this area we just wandered to, and we're struggling. It's the cold. Okay. So you have your character, you set out a little figure. I mean, it'd be nice. I think after the second session, or after the first session, for the second session, people might be bringing little figures. So think of a little figure. Right now, who knows? The first one, maybe it's just, I don't know, small object. But anyway, so you set out your figure, and you have a little sphere thing it's not a sphere, it's a little token. You say, okay, here's the wild. And you roll dice every time you talk, and basically you will be leaving the dice. You need lots of dice. You'll be leaving the die there and continuing in a little row, what I call a track, that you're leaving behind of these rolled dice and their values. After the first one, you don't say what's happening to your Amazon. Someone else does. So given what just happened, based on the roll, someone else chimes in and says, well, in that case, this is what happens next. And so, you roll again and say what you do and roll again. And you're making a little track, and you're doing it the same for everybody else. So everybody's throwing, activity at each other in a very unconstructed way. Just everybody makes sure to keep every Amazon moving. There's rules for merging tracks. There's an ability called the Clear Light of Day, which allows you to realize that your track is related to someone else's, and so you can merge them and work together. There are ways to get a track resolved, and there are ways for the track to be defeated, and you can also abandon a track. So these are all occurring. In the first round, you can't be hurt, so everyone will probably play through to success, or the dice may nail you and you might lose for that particular sphere, but everybody will be fine that first round. Well, so you do this, and you end up with a certain amount of drama. You learn a lot more about the tribe. NPCs are sort of spitballed into existence, and a lot of geography occurs. This is where we go for the winter. We learn a lot. Well, there's a cliff there, stuff like that. So you've got this sort of little action adventure thing. Everybody's pretty heroic. There's no need for conflict of interest particularly. There's no need for disagreement necessarily. It's pretty much we pull together and see if we can get ourselves through this particular set of crisis. So that kind of play will alternate with private writing, because the character sheet is supposed to be exactly the same size as some kind of little notebook. Now, when I first wrote it, I used the word blue book, and that's what I have in my mind, till I realized that hardly anybody knows, who's younger than me, what a blue book even is. But it actually used to be a role-playing technique. You actually blue booked in some games. It started up particularly for 1980s Champions, when people would write fanfic of their own characters and each other's characters sometimes in these little, they used them in school. They're really cheap blue paper notebooks that everybody knew what they were. They were universally used for essay exams. Well, they have gone the way of all things and are no longer with us, which is really too bad because for cheap little notebooks, they were the best. Well, I would imagine finding some sort of equivalent, very, very basic paper pamphlet notebook, not even bound, just stapled, real easy, and making the character sheet just exactly that size, because the idea is that you glue it on there, staple it on there, so that the whole cover is your character sheet. Inside, therefore, is a bunch of blank pages. Typical blue book would be 12 or 16 smallish, pages. The idea here is that in between these action-based season play, because you go up, have to go to the next year, some season in the next year for each time, but in between, you do some private writing. And the private writing has some rules. I'm really happy with the way I phrased the rules because it hit everybody at the table. It wasn't really a table. We used a coffee table for the tracks, but we were seated around a living room. But anyway, everybody in that group, as soon as I read these rules, now these are hardened Swedish weird role players too. I mean, they have played all of Simon's games. They have played a bunch of, the games like It's Complicated, and other games that weird Forge readers have brought over the years for these people. They've played all this stuff. We played Mist-Robed Gate when we were there. They've all played Polaris. They've all played, what have you. That's not a game, but it should be. What have you. Well, anyway, but their jaws just dropped when I read those rules. They went, oh, swallowed kind of hard, and were like, okay, I can do this. And I was like, I know you can. I have no doubt you can. The question is, are you? And so the point is that your character is breaking certain rules of the tribe. Which rules are up to you. It involves intimacy with somebody, forbidden intimacy with somebody. And that means you have to kind of go back to the tribe and remember their rules for like romance and courtship and stuff like that. Because it doesn't have to be, the obvious, a man, right? That doesn't have to be it. The gender of that character is up to you. Even their nature could be a nature spirit or something. I mean, it doesn't even have to be, like a neighboring human person or something. But it is forbidden intimacy, and it is also never going to be found out. This is private for that Amazon. She will live her life and be able to keep this. That character cannot be in seasonal play, for example. And they have an interesting quality, and this is kind of where everybody sort of, shivered a little bit, because you as the writer are supposed to be identifying with that character, whoever they are. This is your avatar, effectively, in the game. Whatever it is, however you identify with them, you are supposed to look at this character as if you were watching some kind of show or reading some kind of book or comic or something, and you see a character and you're like, wow, that is so me. How did the writer do that without knowing me personally? I mean, that's me right there. That's what I would do. That's how I think. That's my response. Your friends who watch it, they elbow you and like, hey, do you see that? That's you up there. So that's how you basically are, thinking of this character that your Amazon is intimate with. How sexual that is up to you, and how explicit your writing is up to you, which means all the way, should you so desire. Well, anyway, that writing is private, as I say, but it's inside the book, and character sheets on the outside. So you alternate these things, and unlike a lot of games, they're not supposed to be obviously and tightly interconnected. But after a bit, you do start sharing entries in the book with other players. Nobody's going to read the whole thing. one person can read one entry out of it at your permission, and that's it, until next time. And so nobody is ever going to read like the whole thing, and you are monitoring, which one they get to read. Now, here's the part that's completely baffling if you haven't tried it. The person who reads it can put little marks on the front of your character sheet. And those marks will play into the seasonal play because they make your character eligible to be injured, and being injured and eligible to be killed. And furthermore, they can be moved around a bit. If you merge tracks, the marks can move. There's basically a consequential thing going on. There's other things the marks do too. The point is that we don't know why a reader would put them on the front of the sheet. And we don't know if having marks is bad or good in anyone's mind. Frankly, they make play more fun, but the point is that you don't really know. You don't know. They could choose not to put any marks. They can choose to put up to a certain number, or increments of that number. And then the increments by which they put them on the sheet are not the same as the increments by which they are used in play. So it's deliberately non-continuous. So there's that, and ultimately there's the ability to receive the goddess blessing for these different spheres of problems for the tribe. If you get 2 goddess blessings out of the 3 spheres, then the tribe basically is now blessed for real and ends up being successful for effectively indefinitely. And it may be that the game ends for other reasons, and the tribe is neither successful in this way, nor is it destroyed. It can be destroyed if all of the spheres in travail at the moment are defeated. You can create new spheres, of conflict as you go. There's a way to stave that off. Few other interesting things. Being injured actually means it's easier to get the blessing. So, it's a lot of different variables kicking around to make it good or bad to get marks, and that's just kind of up to how people feel about it privately. So there's a weird mix of private and public in the information and in your activity with the system. And I didn't know if this was going to have any playability at all. I mean, it looks like a mess, if you ask me. And I even showed it to 1 or 2 other people who like to consult for games, and they were just like, "This, I don't get it." Well, sat down to try it, and they got it. As for our fiction itself, it involved a seasonal situation, which happened to be winter. People wanted to play in winter. So the Amazons are scantily clad, but, in winter they'll bundle up with furs and stuff like that. So anyway, there they were, making their way to where they were going to settle for the season. We were a migratory group, as it turned out. Well, we had a strife with, the settlement that we had just traded with. Apparently they didn't like us or thought they were cheated or something. And so that was a bloody battle, especially with my character, Skyan, who was busy. She was also old. Your starting character is the same age you are, so I had a fairly elderly character by the standards of the tribe. And the old sort of battle-scarred veteran sort. Well, anyway, so she's leading all these sort of young women in their battle. And then simultaneously there was some strife in the tribe. An unsolved murder was discovered by one of the other Amazons. And so therefore, had to get addressed. And then a set of somewhat confusing natural disaster type situations involving disease, which, as it turned out, was combined with the strife and ended up therefore being more about inadvertent poisoning. So anyway, seemed like a big disaster for the tribe, but things kind of came together. One of the most interesting points was when the character who was very good at the attribute called Generous Heart, although not at the maximum for it, but was good at it, actually used it to rally the group to go help Skyan, because Her battle had turned out to be not very successful and was not very popular among the rest of the tribe. But the generous heart Amazon got the rest of them kind of to buckle down and get past the whole crisis within the tribe, and then, go and get enough reinforcements to go down there and get Shkan out of the battle situation. So kind of likes that the straightforward kick-ass part of the game in terms of violence wasn't just about winning a battle. It was more about how the tribe would rally to, resolve that situation. Well, anyway, so it was reasonably dramatic, I would say, and very strong characters emerged for all four of them. And we played a season out, and they wrote in their books, and it was funny too. Kim, the the host of KimCon, sort of butted in halfway through as we were playing, and he was fresh off of some other game that had just finished. He was all jovial, and he sat down and said, "So, are the Amazons sinning yet?" And we all kind of looked at him and were like, "None of your beeswax." And he also pointed out that when people finished writing, he was like, "I've never seen like four gamers finish writing something more or less simultaneously. We all finished within a few minutes of each other, just a page." And he said we all did. We all finished the same. He imitated us. And he was like, close the book. And I didn't notice anyone else doing that. But apparently he said all of us did that almost simultaneously, which was sort of interesting. And the season was kind of fun. I rather liked the adventure. I mean, it was really interesting to realize how things kind of snapped together. We had one character who was very optimized toward the clear light of day, so it's not too surprising that player really worked on merging tracks and kind of turning the whole thing into a what's going on sort of crisis rather than just fighting their way through, which is good because the battle line, which my character was focused on, was had a little trouble. Definitely needed help. We almost got butchered. So it was quite an experience. I enjoyed it, and we rather fell in love with our tribe, the worshippers of the blood goddess, totem of the wildcat. There's lots of options for that stuff, but that's what we ended up being, and it ended up being kind of an interesting tribe, not as perfect perhaps as they think they are, but also not the sort of demonic barbarians that a lot of the people in the surrounding groups thought they were either. So rather likable bunch in their alternate lifestyle, and I found the whole thing quite engaging. I think everybody else sort of culturally bought into our completely fictional culture and were ready to move on, to do stuff with it in further play if we ever got the chance. So I would call it, a remarkably successful playtest, much more so than you expect for the very first time in, an alpha scribbly design. Good news, of course, I went and made a character sheet and, found an icon and stuff like that to stick on there. And overall, I'm kind of tossing it in now with Cathedral and Estimated Profit and Shine a Light, all of which have been playtested, and I find reasonably strong at this point. Every so often I fancy to myself, because you see, they're all really arty. They all produce a nifty crafted artifact. In this case, this little book of potential, shall we just say private literature. And in Cathedral, you end up with these cool pages of a religious text which have undergone revision through centuries and centuries. Then in Shine a Light, you end up with effectively a comic. And then in Estimated Profit, which is like the creme de la creme of the arty thing, you end up with this gorgeous red, wall hanger kind of item that your character sheet used to be. Well, anyway, so they're all very crafty, and I find myself thinking, well, if I ever sell estimated profit, it's got to come with a little arts and crafts kit with scissors and glue and stuff like that. I don't know. That makes no sense, really, but it's a cool idea. Um, Definitely certain items would have to go with them. You would have to have perfect little books, for the cheap, important, cheap little books with the character sheets actually, on the front cover for this one. And the others also, they have items. These are games which have, objects that you use and you craft with and you write on or you glue on and stuff like that. And they're pretty short little books, and each one, I know that the drafts right now are all just sort of instructional notes, how-to drafts. They're not drafts. They're notes, how-to notes for play. If I were to try and come up with inspirational presentation for these, that's a whole question of its own, because they're definitely, well, engaging at a level of our mind which is not very easily accessed verbally. So, who knows? But I don't know if it's practical. I don't know if it makes most sense to put them together in some sort of package. Probably so. I don't know. Maybe it's different. Maybe they should be 4 separate little pamphlets with no equipment at all, just as, like old Melee or old Wizard, these cool little booklet pamphlets, and that's it. And then you have to go out and get your own materials. Who knows what's proper? I need someone really arty to sit down with these and play them, and then say, okay, this is what we're going to do, and then I could work from there. In the meantime, I'd really like people to play this. I'd like people to check this out. People who are willing to put in a few sessions with some like-minded individuals, and I'd love to know about how that goes. I'm making them all available in their current form because I've tweaked them over the years as they've been played, and this is the most recent form. Again, they're just how-to notes. I've stuck them down there in the attachment to this post, and let's play them. Play them with me in the sense that I'm playing them with people too, as often as I can, or that I can convince people to do. Hey, let's play a game about religious, ecstasy. Yeah, right. Get away from me. But I'll do my best to keep going with it. Real interested if you could help me out. Try them yourself. Being weird.